Hello and welcome back to Shakesyear. This could very well be the longest episode that we have because this one is, bleh. We're still working on King Lear, and today we get to hear from Edgar in Act 4, Scene 1. And if you remember, yesterday we finished Act 3, Scene 4, which had everybody, like they finally get Lear to go into the hovel, and that's sort of where that ends. Yeah, not very exciting. So anyway, there's still Act 3, Scene 5, Scene 6, and Scene 7, which we need to do a little bit of a recap on because a lot happens in those scenes. And there's a lot of differences in those scenes between the folio, which is the version that we're following, and other versions, which are often performed more often than these particular scenes in the folio. And or when people are performing this, they'll take the bits that they like from either the folio version or these other versions and put them together into a version that makes sense to them. So anyway, Act 3, and I had to write down some notes. Sorry. Act 3, Scene 5 is between Edmund and Cornwall, where Edmund shows a letter to Cornwall that proves that Gloucester is either in cahoots with the French or at least privy to the French coming to attack England. And if Gloucester hadn't told Cornwall the French were coming to attack, then that's like Gloucester really dropped the ball. So Cornwall gets really mad and sort of disavows Gloucester and like gives the title of Earl of Gloucester to Edmund, in stripping Gloucester of his actual title, and says he's going to arrest Gloucester. And Edmund's like, my plan's working. He does that, like, not at Cornwall, but we, the audience, know that his plan's working. So Act 3, Scene 6, we're back with the King and the Fool and Kent, and Gloucester comes in and out of this scene a little bit, and Kent is really not doing well, and Edgar starts to sort of feel for him because he sees like how messed up Lear's brain has become. In other versions of this, Lear does a mock trial of his daughters where he sets up, you're going to be the justice and you're going to pretend to be my daughter and blah, blah, blah. And he asks them questions and he's like, now let's atomize Reagan. And he wants to know why their hearts are so hard and that sort of a thing. But that's not really in the folio, so we don't get to talk about that one. But the folio version has some elements of that, but not quite as much. It has a little bit of the Fool talking, and it has a little bit more of Edgar empathizing with Lear and sort of feeding into his craziness. Like when Lear references dogs, Edgar takes that and runs with it and names all different kinds of dogs and all that sort of thing. So Edgar is really starting to empathize with the king, who empathized with Edgar when he found Edgar as poor Tom. So anyway, this happens for a little while, and finally they get Lear to go to sleep. At Gloucester's suggestion, Gloucester comes back into this whole scene, and then once Lear is asleep, Gloucester says that he has heard that there is a plot to kill Lear, so they should take Lear to Dover, where he's going to be safe. And in other versions of the play, the scene ends, like they pick up, in all of the versions of the play, they pick up Lear and they start to take him out so they can get him to Dover while he's sleeping. And in some versions, the scene ends, not the folio version, but in some versions, the scene ends with Edgar by himself delivering a monologue where he waxes poetic about how small his problems seem now compared to Lear, and how like he has become an adult now through his experience of being banished, and Lear has become a child now through his experience of being banished, and all that sort of stuff. And it one of the sort of nice things about having that monologue in your bit or in your production is that it gives an excuse for Edgar to no longer be with Lear and Kent as the play moves along, because the beginning of Act 4, Scene 1, Edgar's by himself, and how else would he get by himself? All that sort of thing. The other interesting thing to note about Act 3, Scene 6, sorry, this is such a long one, is that this is the last scene wherein the Fool appears, which is interesting because the Fool has been the truth teller for Lear and sort of the mirror glass that reflects who Lear really is and what's really going on. And after this scene, we don't see him anymore. And there's no actual stage direction in the play to say what happens to him. So a lot of productions kill him off because they don't know what else to do. It's a little weird to have one of these major characters just vanish after Act 3, Scene 4. So, interesting thing to note. Anyway, Act 3, Scene 7. So now we're back at Gloucester's place, and Cornwall shares with Regan and Goneril and servants and a whole bunch of other people. Probably, is Albany there? Albany might be there too. Anyway, shares this letter that proves that Gloucester is a traitor, and then Oswald the servant enters and says that he's heard that they're taking Lear to Dover, and Cornwall sends Edmund to go capture Gloucester, but Gloucester appears just then, because keep in mind he's kind of sort of been under house arrest. He hasn't been given full reign of his house. Control of his house has been taken away, and he's under very close watch. So the fact that he's been going and hanging out with the king is a bad thing as far as Cornwall and Albany and Regan and Goneril are concerned. So he comes back because it's his house, and they're all like, "You're a traitor," and he's like, "What? You're my house guests. What are you doing?" And they start berating him, and they tie him to a chair, and they're like, "What are these letters about? And why are you sending Lear to Dover? Who's going to help Lear when he's in Dover? Give us some names, blah, 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 blah." And finally, he stands up for the king to them and is like, "I'm helping the king because you are all miscreants. You are terrible human beings, and I don't want to see him fall into your hands because I'm afraid of what you would do to him if that were to happen." And they're like, "Wrong answer." So they gouge out one of Gloucester's eyes, and he's screaming and in pain. And Regan's like, "Yeah, take the other one. They should match." And one of the servants, not Oswald, one of the servants stands up and is like, hang on. I have served you well for many, many years, and I have never served you better than I am right now, stopping you from doing this. You should not completely blind that old man. This is wrong. This is bad. You're way out of line on this." And Regan's like, "Wrong answer." So she stabs him and kills him. There's a little bit of a skirmish. In this skirmish between the servant and Regan and Cornwall, Cornwall gets injured, but not so badly injured that he can't go back and gouge out Gloucester's other eye. So as soon as Gloucester's eyes are out, he's like, "Oh, my son Edmund, why didn't you tell me? Edmund, come and help me, blah, blah, blah." And they're like, "It was Edmund that ratted you out for being a traitor." And he's like, "Oh, I backed the wrong son. I should have paid more attention to Edgar. Edgar's probably innocent because Edmund told me all this stuff, blah, blah, blah." And they're like, "Throw him out. He can crawl his way to Dover." So they throw him out the door. And in the folio, the scene ends with Cornwall telling Regan that he's not well, and that this injury that he has sustained has very poor timing. He's afraid that this might be his own end. And it is. They go off stage and he dies. In other versions, there's a quick little bit between a couple of the other servants in the house, and they're like, "I don't want to work for this guy anymore. Let's go help Gloucester." And they're like, "Yeah, okay, great." But that doesn't happen in the folio. Anyway, Act 4, Scene 1, yay! We're almost to today's actual monologue. There's those 3 scenes are big and a lot happens in them, but there's no monologues in the folio long enough to qualify as a monologue for this project, hence just the summaries. So anyway, Act 4, Scene 1 starts out with Edgar by himself. And he says, "Yet better thus, and known to be condemned, than still contemned and flattered to be worst. The lowest and most dejected thing of fortune stands still in esperance, lives not in fear. The lamentable change is from the best. The worst returns to laughter. Welcome, then, thou unsubstantial air that I embrace. The wretch that thou hast blown unto the worst owes nothing to thy blasts. But who comes here? My father, poorly led. World, oh world, but that thy strange mutations make us hate thee, life would not yield to age." So he's waxing poetic once again and saying that maybe this is a good thing that he's been freed of all of the trappings of his fancy life before, and he got the sort of a wake-up call seeing Lear and what Lear became through his downfall and all that sort of thing. And he's like, you know what, maybe I'll be okay. But then he sees this old man helping Gloucester in, who has bandages over his eyes because he has no eyes anymore, And they see each other and they're like, oh, who are you? Who are you? And Gloucester's like, is that the like naked guy that I saw a couple days ago, or just a little bit ago with Lear, who kind of made me think of my son, who I had sort of written off, but now kind of sort of really miss. And the old man's like, yeah, kind of is. And Gloucester says to Edgar / poor Tom, do you know how to get to Dover? And poor Tom's like, yeah. And Gloucester says to the old man, leave me with him, go find him some clothes, but leave me with him and he'll take me to Dover. So the old man goes off to find some clothes, and Gloucester's like, here's a whole bunch of money, there's a great big cliff in Dover, I want you to lead me to it, I want you to lead me right to the edge of it, and then you get this money. And Edgar's like, okay, but he's having feelings because it's his dad who's now blinded, and because he's now gotten to hear this pseudo apology from his dad twice, or at least the fact that Gloucester misses him, all that sort of stuff, like things that are getting close to a potential reconciliation is what he's hearing. So at the end of Act 4, Scene 1, Gloucester and poor Tom, Edgar, go off towards Dover. And thank you for sticking with that through this marathon episode of Shakesyear. And I will see you all tomorrow as we dig a little bit farther into it and see what becomes of Lear, what becomes of Gloucester, what becomes of Edmund, what becomes of Edgar. I mean, they're all over the place now, and it's fun. We'll see how it all ties up at the end. See you tomorrow for more. Mwah.